Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi, and these are today's headlines from the past. Before we begin with today's fascinating headlines from the recorded events of human history, I would like to issue an apology on behalf of the channel for not uploading this episode yesterday. The issue that arose was that the mic had run out of power, and so the issue could not be addressed on time. Therefore, it has been decided that we would re record this episode and upload it today with the broadcast of the 21st of November. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, on this day, the 20th of November, in 1805, the first performance of Beethoven's Fidelio took place in Vienna. One of the most significant pieces produced by one of the most significant, dare I say, one of the fathers of Western classical music's most iconic performances would unfold in the center of art and culture, unfolding in the 19th century, well, early 19th century in Europe. And so, truly, this would be an iconic day in the history of Western classical music. Moving forward, on this day in 1818, Simon Bolivar declared Venezuela independent from Spain. Bolivar, in his successful efforts to liberate Venezuela from Spanish occupation, truly made him go down in history, not just in the history of Latin America, but in the history of the world, as a revolutionary individual and as the face of Latin American revolutionary spirit. His efforts are commemorated to this day as Venezuela's National Day. Therefore, the 20th of November, 1818 truly is a day to remember in history. Moving forward, on this day in 1944, the lights of Piccadilly Circus and Strand were switched back on after the 5 years of blackout caused by the Blitz, or the London Blitz as it is most commonly known, inflicted upon the United Kingdom, the mainland United Kingdom that is, by the air forces of Nazi Germany. Truly, this would be a significant moment in the boosting of morale, caused by the signaling of the war turning in the favor of the Allies. And so, it is interesting that just a year, the following year, after this significant event, in 1945, the Nuremberg war crimes trial of Nazis and Nazi war criminals would take place. On this day, the 20th of November 1945. Truly, this would mark an end to one of the largest ever losses of mankind to have ever unfolded in the history of the world. Subjects of this trial would be the Nazi war criminals, as mentioned earlier, which included individuals like Hermann Goering, Rudolf Hess, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and Julius Streicher. It would last 218 days, and its judgment and conclusion would result in the formations of international charters of human rights and international charters outlawing aggressive war. Truly, this would be a date, both of these dates would truly be significant dates in the history of not just the Second World War, but in the history of the world. And finally, on this day in 1979, Anthony Blunt, the surveyor of the Queen's Pictures, now known as the King's Pictures, was stripped of his knighthood after admitting to being a spy for Russia, then known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics or the Soviet Union, and was thereby exposed as the fourth man in the Burgess, McLean, and Philby spy scandal, also known as the Cambridge Four. This would be one of the most significant moments in the history of the Cold War, for never before this had it ever been imagined that the Soviet Union could infiltrate one of the most highest bodies of governance in the United Kingdom, that is Buckingham Palace and the royal family that resides in it. So truly, the confession of Anthony Blunt was a significant moment in the history of the Cold War. And on that riveting note, we conclude today's headlines of the day. And now we move on to the next segment of our show where we recount the famous births and deaths of famous figures from the 19th and 20th centuries and sometimes earlier. Born on this day in 1925 was Robert Kennedy, the brother of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, former president of the United States. He would serve as the Attorney General and was also, well, he had also announced his intention for running for president in 1968, but unfortunately was assassinated within the same year. And so Robert Kennedy goes down in history as one of the most iconic members of the Kennedy family, just as his brother was, and also going down in the history of the, well, American law and politics as one of the most controversial figures as well. He is remembered not just as the brother of Kennedy, but as a politician in his own right. And alongside him, on this day in 1920, Jean Tierney, the US actress who starred in the title role of Laura in 1944 and in Leave Her to Heaven in 1945, which won her an Oscar nomination, was born on this day. Jean Tierney is one of the most iconic faces of the classic age of Hollywood. And unfortunately, on this day in 1910, Count Leo Tolstoy, Russian author of War and Peace, would pass away. And he was also the writer of the famous novel Anna Karenina, and he is remembered for these works and his hundreds of short stories that he had written. Truly, he is remembered and mourned by the aficionados of Russian literature. And on that unfortunate note, we conclude today's headlines of the day. You are watching and listening to Historian Radio's Echoes of the News, and I am Muhammad Hussain Qazi. And these are today's headlines as history first heard them. Good night.